All right, we are live and we are recording. Thanks, guys, Christian, Mike, for being here. So, becoming the king, this shamanic journey through masculine psycho-spirituality. What are we really talking about here? Why are we here? So, this is really a tale of two books, what we're going to be talking about today. It's my own personal work, with the book that I wrote called The Manifesto for Authentic Masculinity earlier this year, but also a book that's much older that really began in part what is the modern men's movement of consciousness and integrated spirituality, personal development and embodiment, a book called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover that brought an incredibly practical, useful, but also deeply meaningful way of viewing masculine spirituality, and that really helps people understand the different facets of what it means to be a masculine being. Howdy, Brian. Thanks for joining us. Because there's that mystery that sort of surrounds the words masculine and feminine in the modern day. It's like, what are we really talking about when we're using those words? And I explored that a lot in my book, and Moore and Gillette explored it a lot in a very deep way when they wrote King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And so this webinar today is really a deeper exploration of what these archetypes are and why it really matters for us as maybe primarily masculine beings to have them not just in our minds, but in our souls and in our hearts when we are moving throughout the world. Why would it be meaningful or impactful or influential in our lives for us to see ourselves as a king, and therefore as a warrior, as a magician, and as a lover? So I'll talk a little bit about the structure of all of this and where we go from it. So those four archetypes make up what's called the quadrant. And it's the quadrant of the masculine psyche, archetypally speaking. So it's measured essentially as a process of maturation. When we use a phrase like toxic masculinity, what we're actually talking about is a sense of masculinity that's not exactly fully developed. We're talking about people or individuals who are not fully mature in the way that they live their own lives, in the way that they interact and behave with other people, in the way that they move throughout the world. So in a sense, someone who develops all four aspects of this quadrant becomes more or less like a fully mature masculine being. And the king is at the hub of this, and that's why I call this becoming the king, because the king is actually a warrior and a magician and a lover in perfect balance. The king is its own archetype, but the king is also all of the other archetypes. So we'll talk a little bit about the king as an archetype himself. But I'll start off this. I like to make this as interactive as possible. Chime in, guys. What are some of your favorite examples of a king, either in art or movies or history? What are some examples, maybe of virtuous kings? We can think of some evil kings too, or shadow kings, but what are some examples?
Michael Jackson.
The king of pop, right? Yes. I like
King
that.
Arthur?
New one. Yeah. What's up? We have one or two others.
Oh, King Arthur?
King Arthur, yeah, classic Western mythological example. Yeah.
The only one I can think of, because it's current, is LeBron James. They call him the king. That's the only one that pops up in my head right now.
Brian's got the examples today. Good. 3 points for Brian. Okay. So like LeBron James, right? They might call him the king on the basketball court. Why? Because he is fierce. Somebody who's dominating at sports or something like that, or someone who is an impeccable musician, like Michael Jackson, for instance, they have this kind of like superhuman-esque quality to them. There's something about them that is impeccably special, and it's kind of like a divine quality. And this is something about the king, is that the king is kind of this embodiment of God in flesh and blood, like God as a man, someone who in their presence there is this incredibly powerful energy that emanates from them, and someone who is inherently connected to nature and the laws of nature. So the way that LeBron James moves his body on the court, the perfect way he might execute a slam dunk or a layup or something like that, or the impeccable way that Michael Jackson might, sing a melody or moonwalk. There's this quality of godliness that emanates from them. If someone's really good at something, they're like a god. And so the king has this quality. And therefore, because they're in tune with this divinity, in tune with this this connection to the laws of nature, they have this ordering function. It's an organizing faculty. So if you imagine, normally I would have like a mandala behind me, but if you can imagine like a mandala, and then there's the center of the mandala, and then there's this symmetrical emanation from the center point of the mandala, right? The king is kind of like the center point of the mandala, and the rest of his kingdom or his life is like the rest of it, right? If there's something off in the center of the mandala, then the mandala itself might not be symmetrical, and there might be disharmony in the whole of the kingdom. And it's analogous in the same way. If we are in tune with the king energy, then we are embodying this sense of organization and structure in an aligned way in our lives. And so it's kind of similar to how, we talk about, well, if there's something askew in our home or in our business or in our relationship, then that's also a reflection of what might be out of alignment within ourselves as well, right? So therefore, our kingdom, our life, the things that make up our life are in essence a reflection of ourselves. And the king is a beautiful example of this, because in all of these mythologies, when the king is strong and wise and fertile, he can bear children with the queen, and there's that that strength and power, but also that sexual prowess that the king might have. All of the crops are growing and all of the cattle are healthy, and like the economy's amazing, and just the kingdom is flourishing, like all is right in the world when the king is on top of his game and when he is a provider of fertility. And likewise, if the king is old and weak and frail, the crops are withering, the cattle's desiccated and dying, people are stricken by poverty, and everything is falling to shit. And it's reflected that way in our lives when we see ourselves as a king and we see something askew in the kingdom or some manifestation of abundance in the kingdom. We recognize how that relates to ourselves, because we have this relationship with the kingdom, with our lives, as this sovereign figure, and recognizing the God in ourselves and our faculty as a creator in our lives. The king has a special power. It's my favorite because it's the most easily accessible for people, because the king bestows blessings, right? Everybody has an inner circle in their lives. If our lives are a kingdom, then we also have an inner court. They're the people who are the most important to us. They're our friends, they're our closest business partners, they're our a significant other, they are our family, hopefully. And so these people, we see them, we have an opportunity to see them deeply. If we're tuned in to the king energy, then we can also recognize the virtues in other people. And therefore, we can essentially elicit other people's greatness by recognizing it. So, for instance, the king would promote someone in his court. Imagine like LeBron James, since we're using that example, like coming up to someone who he sees playing basketball, and he compliments the way that they're showing up on the court. He's like, man, you have a real tenacity out there. I can see you becoming a star, like something like that. Like keep at it. Like I feel greatness in you. How much would that make the day of like a college athlete? Can you imagine like what that would feel like if somebody who's tapped into that was recognizing that greatness in you? Or if Michael Jackson, if he was still alive, said something like that to, an upstart musician or someone who has just gotten their career going. It would make a world of difference to that person, because here's this person who's tuned into their greatness, essentially seeing the greatness in this other person and bring it out of them. So the king has the power of bestowing blessings onto others because he feels the greatness within himself and can therefore reflect it and recognize it in that of other people as well. And that's incredibly powerful to be able to tune into when you can authentically compliment someone. And that seems like a light word in this instance underneath of bestowing blessings, but it truly is very, very powerful. The king codifies laws in the kingdom. So again, if the kingdom is our life, what laws do we live our life by? And it's a very similar question to the idea of what principles do we live our life by as well. And principles, different people have all different kinds of principles. For instance, a business mentor that I look up to, actually one of his principles is fun. So if he starts, his meetings with his team of people that he works with, he always likes to start them with stories like, oh, what did you do since the last time that we spoke that, was really fun? That, what's a great story? What would inspire us? They always start from that point because he values fun in his life. If we're getting too busy, what's really the point of being alive? We're missing the point of why we're working at that point. In a similar way, I might value integrity. Integrity might be a law in my life, and I'm out of integrity, I'm breaking my own laws, right? And the king probably shouldn't do that. So in that sense, it has to do with what principles we live our lives by, which are governed by our purpose, our sense of purpose in our lives. What laws and principles can we put into place to keep ourselves and the other people in our lives harmonious with what we're living for? That also has to do with establishing boundaries, which is somewhat of a warrior faculty, and we'll get into that. The king also is a force of integration. It can seem like there are so many different aspects to our life, so many different aspects to even who we ourselves are, which is part of what we're recognizing here when we're seeing ourselves as all of these different archetypes. We're all extremely complex beings. We have one name, but we in ourselves are extremely complex beings with a multitude of different ways that we express ourselves. So as a force of integration, the king energy recognizes of who we are at our essence. Remember, this is the God in man. So the essence of who we are, not our name, not what we do for a living, but something much deeper. And that's where the king energy is, and therefore integrates all of these different aspects. Oh, I can put these 25 different labels on myself and be confused about who I am. And I've been there, and I'm a version of that right now, if I'm being honest. But that faculty of the king, if you root into it, everything seems to make more sense. And we don't get confused by our chameleon natures, if you will. So the king doesn't just have a crown on his head, right? He also has a sword at his side. And if we're thinking about that classic archetypal, like medieval king kind of thing, but you can also think of like Leonidas, you know, if you ever saw 300 or read about the Peloponnesian War, King Leonidas, right? This is Sparta, kicks the messenger into the pit. Classic warrior king. King Arthur is another example. Aragorn from The Lord of the Rings is another amazing example. Who has any examples of warriors that have either inspired you, like movies, art, history? Who are some warriors that we might look up to or revere?
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great, yeah. Another good example of the warrior king archetype, yeah. That made me think of Napoleon when you said that. Any other warriors? Could be more recent history too. I mean, we talked about LeBron and Michael, so.
Originally, I was going to say the king in Pocahontas, but I don't I don't think that's very accurate. I'm not sure.
Like the chief?
Yeah.
Her father? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, too, the only thing that comes to my head is another sports thing. For whatever reason, maybe I'm not so attuned to pop culture, but Alex Smith, who is a quarterback for the Redskins, he broke his leg drastically and he had like a lot of operations and he's planning to come back. So I consider him a warrior, that he's even thinking about coming back to football after having such, you know, complications and operations and just fighting through that and trying to get back into playing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's that like that commitment, that aggressiveness, that tenacity. Like somebody who does something like that, you wonder like what are they so committed to that they would, you know, go through hell and back, you know, to do what they want to do. It's a really good example. So thanks for bringing that up.
Or the Washington football team.
The Washington Redskins.
Yeah.
Washington football team.
Whatever they are now. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great example. Those are all actually really good examples. I don't know about Pocahontas, but I'm rooting for you, Christian. You'll score some points here.
I'll sub in Pocahontas with George Washington. Final answer.
Whoever her like would-be husband was, you know, like the guy with the dagger, John Smith, I guess, too.
Or how about who was on? For some reason I'm blanking. Sacagawea, right? Was she the one that was on the Lewis and Clark expedition? That's pretty.
Yes,
badass.
I think that was her.
Not a masculine example, but yeah, that's pretty badass.
Right. Well, you know, like women will have these masculine kind of archetypes within themselves too. This, you know, the lines can certainly get blurry. So the warrior, right? And we can use some of these examples in talking about what are the different aspects of the warrior. So if the king draws the boundaries of the kingdom, all right, what are the boundaries therefore in my life? You know, what am I living my life by? What are the laws? Where's, you know, the edge of the nation, of the kingdom? The warrior is an energy that defends those boundaries. And therefore he has a quality of thinking, he has a discernment. He has the ability to recognize when something is like an ability to discern quality in different things. And so what I mean by that is, like, you know, if you are on this, if where you're at in your life is you're trying to create more space for yourself, right? Maybe you're an artist, and so you know that you want to commit to having more solitary time, right? And so you do that. I'm gonna have 2 hours today, right? You might shut off your phone, all right? Enforcing that boundary there. I'm not going on my phone. But also, your friend who you love, you're on the street, you're at a coffee shop table, you're, you know, like drawing or whatever, and your friend who you love comes up to you and they're like, oh my God, Mike, you know, how are you doing, man? Like, yeah, I haven't seen you in like 3 days. How are you doing? And they're trying to, you know, like rope you in, right? It would be so easy to say, you should just forsake, you know, your intentions and to get roped into that. But there's something about the warrior energy that maintains the boundary. It defends the boundary. And so you take your sword or your shield and you say, hey buddy, like, it's really great to see you. I'm actually like kind of deep in my process right now. Let's talk some other time. And it doesn't have necessarily to do with like distancing yourself from people, but it does have to do with maintaining strong boundaries with your intentions and making sure that your intentions are not flimsy, to be blown over with the slightest breeze. There are a lot of other examples that we could have for that, and some of that clarity of thought is actually brought through a kind of, the way they phrase it is emotional detachment, but that often sounds a little bit cold, right? It's not the lack of empathy or even the lack of sympathy. It is essentially an awareness of your emotions, but the ability to act in this sense of a higher good without your emotions governing your decision making. So, you know, if you were in that same situation, you might worry about hurting your friend's feelings, and your worry that you would be hurting your friend's feelings would keep you from actually giving time to yourself and therefore nurturing, you know, that creative faculty within yourself. That kind of emotional detachment helps you to think clearer, because in that sense, you do not have the same levels of bias. If you were a mediator in an argument, for instance, if two members of your family are having it out and you find yourself mediating their disagreement, if you yourself were quite angry and emotionally charged at the situation, you would be a much less effective mediator. Your thinking and clarity of mind and discernment would essentially be distorted because of your own emotional bias in the situation. So the warrior has that discernment, that clarity of thought, discernment, right? Like cutting, like with a weapon or a sword or a blade. He has that because, one, he has a detachment from that emotional investment in whatever it is, but also he has mastery over his mind and body. He has this sense of discipline that's brought through training, essentially. So the warrior is someone who is used in one way or another to practice, to overcoming adversity. He's someone who, I mean, if you could look at it like physical training is an example of that, which is why I'm loving all Brian's athlete examples. The stadium is our modern day Coliseum, right? So we go and we see a fight or a game, and those people are warriors. I mean, sports are essentially like war analogies most of the time. We're getting into the end zone of the enemy territory. You know, we're stealing bases, or, you know, there's so many ways that you can think about these things. But the warrior is someone who has discipline through training, and they have a mastery over their mind and body because they have the commitment to their training and to their discipline. And it takes it takes consistency, and it takes focus, and it takes awareness to be able to do all of those things. And the warrior has this in spades. And how do they have it? Like that same question we were asking about, like, what is it that this dude has that has him returning to one of the most violent games in the world after what could have been a career-ending injury? What is that? And it's the same thing where you ask a question like, what has a person riding into battle? What is that? And so in this frame of understanding, it is a commitment to something higher than oneself. And that's called a transpersonal commitment, or a transpersonal sense of duty. Specifically to the king energy, right? If the king is the God in man, the king is this sense of a higher purpose, or some sort of spiritual energy or ideal. And so the warrior gains his strength, his commitment to his ideals, and that fuels the pursuit of mastery that's gained through discipline, through training, through these impossible ordeals that someone would have to overcome. I mean, like, how did Frodo do it, guys? Like, I mean, he had to have some of this. He had to know, that he had to do it, because it wasn't about him. It was about all of Middle Earth. Frodo was quite a meek character at times, but he also had a lot of warrior energy. He was surrounded by warriors, and it rubbed off on him, that Shire boy. I guess he was 40 during the time the story was happening, but, whatever. So, and in that, riding into battle, the warrior knows that they could die any day. So they have an awareness of their death, an awareness of their mortality. Now, what would happen, right, if you had a reminder every day? Maybe it was like a little ding on your phone or whatever, or maybe it was just a thought. What if God implanted the thought in your head every day? Hey, remember, you're mortal. I mean, we would probably waste a lot less time. It's when people say, like, if you had a year to live, like, how would you spend your life? Would you still be at your 9 to 5, right? What would you be doing? And so it brings this sense, this awareness of mortality, of what's really important. And so that's why, he might not skimp on the training that he does, or what he's cultivating in himself or in the kingdom. And because he has all this power, this aggression that he has it's an energy that rouses other people. And it can rouse himself too. The warrior has this capacity where it can be very self-motivating. Warriors usually in community with other warriors in one way or another, so they can rouse each other, so to speak. Again, I love all the sports analogies. In the movies, the team goes to the back, they're losing, but the coach gives this amazing fiery speech and da-da-da-da, and you guys are going to kill it. And all of a sudden, they're still losing, but they go out fired up, jumping off the walls, and then they tear the other team to pieces because the coach roused them with his capacity. And that's a kingly capacity too. If you can imagine someone standing in front of their kingdom, inspiring the masses. So, hopefully we're starting to see how all of these things intermix between each other, and how when they are all mixed up like that, they're actually at their best. Last thing about the warrior is he has a capacity to destroy. And there's a lot of spiritual people who are averse to the warrior in general, but especially to this part. It's like, the thing about destruction is that destruction is actually necessary for creation. We need to make room usually for something to invite in something new. So it beckons the question, what no longer serves? What no longer serves? What is worthy of destruction? We can think of it in an individual or a collective sense. What in our lives does not serve us anymore? All the shit in our attic, in our garage, a toxic relationship, a job that we hate going to every single day. And in a collective sense too, police brutality, you know, like the prison systems as they are, you know, modern day slavery. I mean, it's really applicable to a lot of these issues that are present. So systemic structures worth destroying, things in our lives that don't serve us, worth destroying. It's the energy of the warrior. The king, who's also a warrior, is also a magician, right? And the magician is a mystic. They're an alchemist. They're someone who knows how to weave energies to have influence upon reality and other people and themselves. They see and feel deeply. Does anyone have any examples of a magician in their, again, you know, movies, someone they met? Have you met a magician? And I don't necessarily mean someone who, you know, is like on stage performing magic. This could also be like a wizard or a sage or someone who has that shaman, someone who has that kind of a faculty.
Yoda?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good one.
I had to go without sports on that one.
Thanks.
Or maybe even like Zig Ziglar.
Yeah, totally.
He knows how to weave energy.
I
Yeah.
was thinking a little bit more of, I'm obviously skewed by my musician perspective, but Michael League, he's the leader of this band called Snarky Puppy, and they were just a bunch of college dudes from North Texas, and then they started integrating with the gospel scene, and then they took live music and sort of brought it back to the forefront of like something to be popular or to listen to and to like go hang out at and go to concerts and festivals for.
Yes,
absolutely.
And would a magician be somebody who kind of like started something and then other people like followed this person and kind of?
So we'll get into it, and we'll see how.
Stan Lee, maybe like the comic book, you know.
Yeah, that'd be a good example too. Yeah. I didn't do this in the previous webinar. I like, you know, hearing all your different examples because it changes the character of everything that we're doing. So let's talk about the magician a little bit, because we can weave in all these different examples, right? So the magician is a knower and a master of technology. And, you know, like, I don't mean like the laptop that I'm doing this webinar on. I mean, like, the Greeks had the word techne, which means technique. So when we're talking about technology, we're talking about what takes the knowledge of technique. And that could be everything from like dentistry to jazz music, right? Or literally technology. It's someone who has such a knowledge of something such that the way that they use their knowledge appears to be magic by someone who does not know it. And so in that way, they have this kind of mystique to them. They can bring other people into essentially a world of mystery that would be a mystery to another person. So like you were asking, Brian, is it someone who starts something and, you know, they bring other people into it like a leader? Well, they are, in a sense, like an initiate themselves into these worlds of knowledge and information and techne. And they're also someone who has a capacity to guide other people through kind of a process of transformation with that same technology. So like Zig Ziglar, you know, for instance, maybe if you guys don't know him, Zig Ziglar is a motivational speaker, very, very popular in sales, in the world of sales especially. So, you know, if he's in front of an audience or if he's like talking to the sales force of a company, he is initiating them into essentially a mindset, right? and he's storytelling to create in their being this experience of being initiated into this new way of being, this new way of thinking, and therefore initiates these changes in their lives, a process whereby they become transformed, right? And the magician has that capacity because they themselves have gone through it, right? So a lawyer, for instance, how many hours of study does a lawyer have to go through to actually be able to be a magician of law, to use a law as magic? Regardless, they, after a point, they have the capacity to help other people who have absolutely no friggin' clue what they would do in a courtroom. Like, thank God we have lawyers, because if we didn't, most of us would be fucked, right? Same with dentistry. I like using these like everyday examples because, you know, magician sounds so airy-fairy, right? But like a dentist is a magician too. Not all of them own it. Some of them are boring as heck, right? They try to talk to us, but, you know, even if our mouth was full of stuff, we might not even want to respond. But whatever, right? Like, thank God they know what they're doing with teeth, because we need that, right? We need to be initiated and have space held for us. But they are also, the magician is also someone who's ritualistically savvy. They know the value of having, I hate the word routine. Ritual is actually a lot more empowering of a word, in my opinion, to use. And I don't mean ritual as in, you know, like burning incense and lighting a candle. I mean, that can be, you know, ritual if you're, you know, into certain spiritual practices or whatever. But I literally, you know, a ritual can be as simple as, you know, like taking a walk before you go to work, right? It's something to affect change in your work. You know what it does to you to go on a walk, or for someone else to do that. And I'm making it very simple for a reason, because a simple ritual can radically change consciousness. It's the little things every day. Like if I wake up and immediately drink a full glass of water, it's a very, very good ritual to have. And so the rituals can be very simple, and they can also be somewhat complex. Rituals can be stacked on one another. You know, if you have ever investigated like the miracle morning, for instance, like these specific ways to, like, you know, have an amazing morning the first time that you wake up. What's the effect of it? To get you into a flow state, right? Rituals affect change. They leave energy. And so that's the point of the magician being ritualistically savvy. And in the same vein, the magician holds sacred space. And sacred space does not have to mean calling in the directions and, saying an om, collectively, right? It can be as simple as just sharing really potent eye contact with someone. It can even be without process entirely, and it can just be an energy that you carry forth. Like if you're really tuned in to your heart and you walk into a room, you totally change the vibe of the room. You may not realize it. Some other people may not be like consciously aware of it, but our energy does affect reality. So if we have sacred space within ourselves, then we can therefore create sacred space in the world around us. We've all met those people, right? Where we notice them when they walk in the room, but there's like something really powerful about someone who can walk in the room and just affect that change. They raise the vibe, like wherever they go. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to know someone like that. Because they're a keeper of sacred knowledge, they have to be quite careful. If I'm passing this on to someone, is it someone who's going to use it for good? Especially if it is particularly potent, powerful knowledge that can be abused. So in being an initiate, in initiating others, the magician has to have kind of like the discernment of the warrior to be able to judge for themselves accurately, is this person, you know, is it right to pass on what I know to them? Or if you're a lawyer, right, like, is this person worth defending? I mean, if you're Alan Dershowitz, you know, like anyone with money is worth defending, but, you know, we don't have to go there. The real magician, not a black magician.
Magic.
Right, exactly. There are black magicians out there too. They're manipulators. So they see deeply the reality within reality. You know, if you're going to be an expert in anything or keep sacred knowledge or just kind of have that like magical faculty about you, you can peer a little further through the veil of everyday life and existence. And so therefore there's a wisdom that comes with that, seeing the patterns of reality, whether it's like understanding, you know, subatomic structure and, you know, like quantum physics, or whether it's just like the intricacies of emotion. We can feel and see a little bit deeper into the reality within reality, and in that same vein, an awareness of our own inner landscape as well. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What are my intentions right now? What does my body, what sensations do I have in my body right now? Do I feel healthy today? Do I feel sick today? All of that. It's like walking into your own control room, and there's knobs and dials and, you know, so you can read all of these different things within yourself. That would be your inner landscape, the awareness of everything that's happening for you in that moment. So the magician is very important to the integration of the rest of this. But one of the things that balances all of this, that ties all of it together, that breaks down boundaries, is the faculty of the lover, the archetype of the lover, because the lover is somewhat averse to boundaries entirely, which makes him a mystery in this whole thing. We kind of have to be a little better on our time here, but does anyone have any examples of the lover archetype just off the top of their head?
I only have one, but it's a bit of a joke. I'll text it to you sometime later. It's probably not appropriate for now.
Okay.
Junior.
Who was the guy back? I'm trying to think back in like medieval times or whatever. It was like the lover.
Well, that would be Casanova.
Casanova, yes.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something, Mike?
I was gonna say Robert Downey Jr.
Nice. Yeah. I'm trying to think of which movie he might be the different archetypes of a lover depending on different movies for sure. Thinking like, wow, I guess, you know, Tony Stark might fit some of the qualities I'm about to.
Yeah, Tony Stark. Yeah, some of it. And then he had, I think it was The Breakfast Club. He was in that.
Mm-hmm. I know I'm going to be expanding my list of movies to watch through this program, which is going to be good. But let's run into this because we're running out of time. So the lover is primarily attuned to feeling and sensation. You know, like it's important to be able to think logically and rationally, but the lover especially is attuned into what we can feel, what emotion is in the human experience. And they are, in a sense, they seem antithetical to a lot of the other archetypes because they are kind of averse to boundaries. The lover in us is the part of us that, you know, if we are, you know, standing at the edge of a cliff or like near a cliff, and then there's like all this beautiful water and like a sunset, and the sun is like glimmering off the water. The lover is the part of you that wants to just like run like at full speed off of the cliff and just like dissolve into like all of the beauty. Or, you know, like to ascend into the sky, you know, like, and become one with everything else and merge with beauty itself. And because of that, it can seem that there is this conflict between the other archetypes, which have a lot to do with preserving boundary. However, this balance that the lover brings to all of the other archetypes keeps the king from becoming a tyrant, just as the warrior keeps the king from becoming a weakling. The lover keeps the warrior from becoming a sadist, just as, you know, the warrior energy itself might keep him from becoming a masochist. So the lover has this capacity of balancing most of the archetypes, actually, and can connect in a primality to this, a sort of source of spirituality, if you will. And this does have to do with being a lover in a relationship, but it mostly has to do with being a lover to the universe, to the experience of being alive, if you will. And if you can be fully alive, if you can be a lover to the universe, you can be a beautiful lover to, I almost said any partner, but like the right partner, hopefully. So there's this capacity of connection to the mystery of existence. Like the magician is someone who perceives and understands the reality within reality. The lover is the feeling of being connected to it, of merging with it, of intercourse with it, if you will. And so therefore, there's a keen empathy that comes with being the lover, because the lover does more than understand with mind. They understand with soul, with feeling, and with sensation. There's access to the full spectrum of feeling and emotion. So therefore, the lover is very tuned into the joys of life itself, but also to the pain. You know, not everybody's a Christian. I don't call myself a Christian, but Christ is an excellent archetypal example of any or all of these things. Specifically, I like to use it for this example because just as much as Christ is this figure of, you know, like infinite love or whatever, if you will, I mean, we see him most of the time dying on a cross. And that idea of dying for the sins of mankind is very much related to this idea of the lover who has an endurance of pain. Because if we're becoming more sensitive in general, not only are we going to feel really good at times because there's a lot of bliss inherent in life, there's also a lot of pain inherent in life as well. And that's not because we have a shitty mindset or because, you know, we're not confident or sacred enough or anything. It's just part of being human. It's part of being alive, is experiencing pain and upheaval. So the lover is sensitive to all of that, and they don't spiritually bypass any of it. And because they have this, they are also very much related to these ideas of the artist and the psychic and the connoisseur as intuitive, as someone who has the capacity to create. Because they feel deeply, they understand the universe, they reflect the universe in their art. Because they're incredibly sensitive, they're receptive to messages and impressions, and therefore can kind of deliver those messages to other people, if you will. And because they're deeply sensitive, like let's take wine, for instance. Wine is a kind of easy thing to imagine someone being a connoisseur of. if you are a connoisseur of wine and you're tasting wine, you'll have a lot more to say about it than someone who is very casual, about their wine consumption. Like I'll be like, oh, it tastes good. But, my friend who, like is a connoisseur has all these, like an entire language practically, like to describe the nuances and the intricacies and the subtleties of what they're picking up. And they have that kind of eye for quality within that too. So I wish I could spend more time on the lover, but we're running out of time for real. So I want to like wrap all this together and kind of explain where we go from here and why this relates to me and why I'm, bothering to put it out there to people every week for like a month and a half. So there comes a time in the life of every life coach where one has to wonder, is it something I really want to do to, like have more and more one-on-one clients in my schedule? And I'm fast approaching that point where I'm like, I think this is enough. And so having reached this point, the question becomes, what now? And what I found that I was most inspired to do was start a group program. And I found nothing more inspiring to do a group program on than a masterclass based on an embodiment of these archetypes and the cultivation of authentic masculinity. Sorry, I'm Mellie's right now. She's cooking something or whatever. So right, the authentic masculinity, it's a masculinity based in a sense of soul. How do we communicate with soul? What is the language of soul? The language of soul is symbol, and the archetypes are symbols in action, in energy, in movement, with character. We can feel that sense of soul palpably by working with the archetypes. And so to communicate what exactly it is that someone achieves through embodying these archetypes is a deeply grounded, someone who works with this, they're deeply grounded in a sense of their own expanding masculine power. And they feel inspired to take action on their soul's purpose because they have a clarity of what their soul's purpose is, and they know they have a duty to fulfill. They establish and they defend the boundaries that protect their own vital creative energy. They've deepened their sense of meaning, of love, and of connection with their work, with their relationships, and with their own body, mind, and heart. And they feel community connection with other aligned souls. And so that's kind of what this is about, feeling fully alive, magically active, and full of wonder. What we're actually going to be doing starting in September, we don't have a defined date yet, as I'm opening up a class for a maximum of 12 people. I'm not saying it's men exclusively, but that's kind of what it looks like it's going to be. I was going to wait to see who's going to sign up for this. If I have 8 women and 4 men interested, I'm not going to make it like a men's group only. But 12 people over a course of 8 weeks, we're going to be diving deep into these archetypes. It's going to be profoundly transformative for the people that decide to come on board. And it's going to be dirt cheap. When I work with people one-on-one, it can, I do very deep transformative work with people. So it's an investment. And eventually this group program is going to be an investment too. It's eventually, after this beta run, it's going to be $1,200 ticket for those 8 weeks, which is still kind of a steal for really high quality life coaching in this realm. For this first group, you can claim a spot for $600. The caveat to that is you can claim that spot as long as you invite a small handful of people to the next time that I do this webinar, so that we can keep the message going, so that we can get a really solid group together, because that's the point, is community connection with other aligned souls, having a lot of fun and friendship, and creating bonds that we're going to have for the rest of our lives. It's about developing a sense of authentic masculinity embodied in ourselves and spreading that throughout the world, because we all need that right now. Like now more than ever, with the political structures crumbling, with people at their breaking point from the pandemic financially and mentally and emotionally, it's very important to be as embodied as we possibly can be, as powerful, aligned men who know where they're coming from in their masculinity in a creative way, in a powerfully compassionate way. And that's what this is all about. And so if any of you guys are interested in taking advantage of that opportunity, or if you just want to talk to me more about what that would look like, or, you know, if there's ways of, you know, like working with the financial piece, just, I'd love to talk to each of you to feel into, you know, how you want to engage with it. If you're a yes or you're a no, that's fine. If you're not sure, that's totally cool. I'd love to talk to you about wherever you are. And if you liked this webinar, I would really enjoy your feedback on what you got from this, how this was useful for you, because this is only the second time I've done this. So already this feels a lot better than the first one. So we're at the top of the hour. I don't want to hold you guys too long because I respect your time and I respect my own. But I do want to just hold space if you guys have any questions about anything that we talked about the program, just anything at all. If you have some questions you want to ask right here, totally open to that for a few minutes.
No, I think I'm good for now, but I'll be in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, Christian. Much appreciation to you. Thanks for hopping on.
For sure.
Thank you,
right.
Dan.
I was gonna say right now my finances are until the whole unemployment thing gets straightened out, which might take a while. So right now, a month to month, you know, kind of, and day to day or day by day. So, you know, maybe when my finances are in a better position, I'll look at it. But I will, you know, tell people about this.
So will I.
Cool. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate, you know, straightforward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. I appreciate you showing up. And your feedback, the interaction. That was really valuable. You made this better. Cool. Thank you.
Dan, thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank
you.
Mike. Appreciate you too, brother. Thanks so much for hopping on.
You're welcome.
All right, I think I need to make food too.
I hear that. I hear that.
Go get something to eat or make something to eat from here. Thank you so
Cool.
much. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Cool. Thank you.
Take
Bye,
care.
guys.